We have breaking news tied to President Trump's push to give himself more control over America's elections.
Release more rulings, and once again, this decision day could include their blockbuster decision on President Trump's tariffs. Hundreds of billions of dollars are on the line for mega corporations, small businesses, and American consumers. But other critical constitutional issues are also in the Supreme Court's hands. From voting rights to trans rights to Trump's power to fire a member of the Fed.
We are following some breaking news at this hour. I did want to share this social media post from the Democrats saying that oversight Dems have received new emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate that raise serious questions about Donald Trump and his knowledge of Epstein's horrific crimes. Read them for yourself. It's time to end this cover-up and release the files. This is some file footage of the late Jeffrey Epstein, and I did want to share some more information on this breaking news. Jeffrey Epstein writing in a 2011 email that President Trump had, quote, spent hours at Epstein's house with a victim of sex trafficking, and said in a separate message years later that President Trump knew about the girls, in quotation marks. That's according to communications released today. Now, the emails made public by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee add to the questions about President Trump's friendship with Epstein and about any knowledge that he may have had in what prosecutors call a years-long effort by Epstein to exploit underage girls.
If you thought the Epstein files were finally fading into the background, think again. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee just dropped new emails straight from Epstein's estate, and they are brutal. One from 2011 claims Trump spent hours at Epstein's house with a victim of sex trafficking. Another later message says Trump knew about the girls. They're calling it a cover-up and demanding the full files be released. That's the context we're walking into right now. Because while those old allegations are being dragged back into the light, Donald Trump is not playing defense. He's on offense trying to rewrite the rules of who gets to vote in this country before the 2026 midterms. He doesn't want to go through Congress. He wants to do it himself, with the stroke of a pen. And when lawmakers pushed back, he didn't negotiate. He melted down. This isn't just about voter ID anymore. This is about a president who believes the rules only apply when they work in his favor. Let's break down exactly what happened. On February 13th, Trump went on Truth Social and made his intentions very clear. He said he was going to issue an executive order to impose nationwide voter ID requirements before the 2026 midterms. But he didn't stop there. In the same post, he admitted something important, that the actual legislation to do this the right way was stalled in Congress. That's the part he probably shouldn't have said out loud. He basically told everyone that because Congress wouldn't give him what he wanted, he was just going to do it himself. No debate, no vote. Just a signature from the Oval Office and suddenly new voting rules for the entire country. Then came the usual attack. He claimed Democrats refused to support voter ID because they want to keep cheating in elections.
It's very simple. All voters must show voter ID. All voters must show proof of citizenship in order to vote.
Anyone who opposes his plan, according to him, is helping steal elections. It's the same playbook he always runs. If you don't agree with him, you must be corrupt. What I find especially telling is how casually he treats the Constitution here. He knows elections are run by the states. He knows Congress has the authority to set federal election rules, not the president acting alone. But none of that seems to matter when he wants something done quickly.
And perhaps most importantly, I'm asking you to approve the Save America Act. To stop illegal aliens and others who are unpermitted persons from voting in our sacred American elections. That cheating is rampant in our elections. It's rampant. It's very simple. All voters must show voter ID.
Listen to how he frames it. Not as a policy debate, but as a moral fight against cheating. He makes it sound simple, almost obvious. But what he's really doing is trying to bypass the legislative branch entirely because he doesn't have the votes. That's not strength. That's just refusing to accept that he can't always get his way through normal channels. And that's exactly why this moment matters. Because when the president starts treating Congress like an inconvenience instead of a co-equal branch, someone eventually has to push back.
A federal judge ruled yesterday that President Trump's request to add a documentary proof of citizenship requirement to the federal voter registration form cannot be enforced. U.S. District Judge Colleen Kohler-Cotelli in Washington, D.C. sided with Democratic and civil rights groups that sued the Trump administration over his executive order he issued back in March that included requiring documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections and that all ballots be received by Election Day. She ruled that the proof of citizenship directive is an unconstitutional violation of the separation of powers, as the administration has argued that such a mandate is necessary to restore public confidence that only Americans are voting in U.S. elections.
What happened next is something we don't see very often anymore. Congress actually pushed back, and it wasn't a narrow party line vote where Democrats barely scraped together enough support. This was bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats both looked at Trump's plan to impose nationwide voter ID through executive order and said no. That almost never happens these days. For years, we've watched Congress largely defer to the executive branch, especially when the president belongs to their own party. But this time, enough Republicans joined Democrats to block Trump from rewriting election rules on his own. They didn't just stay silent, they voted to stop him. I think that tells you how far Trump was trying to reach. He wasn't asking Congress to pass a law. He was telling them he was going to do it anyway, whether they liked it or not. And for once, they refused to go along with it. Some of those Republicans clearly decided that letting one man unilaterally change voting requirements right before a midterm election was a step too far. This wasn't about whether voter ID is good or bad policy. This was about who gets to make that decision. Trump wanted to take that power for himself. Congress, at least this time, decided to keep it. What makes this moment stand out is how rare it has become for lawmakers to actually defend their own authority. For too long, they've let presidents from both parties expand executive power while they stayed on the sidelines. But here, they drew a line. And that line matters, because if Congress keeps surrendering its power every time it gets uncomfortable, then it stops being a real check on anything. That's why this vote is worth paying attention to. It wasn't just about voter ID. It was about whether Congress is still willing to act like a co-equal branch of government. This vote didn't come out of nowhere. Congress finally pushed back because they've watched this exact pattern play out too many times already. Trump keeps testing how far he can go, and for a long time, nobody stopped him. But lately, that's starting to change. Just days before this voter ID fight, the Senate advanced a bipartisan war powers resolution after Trump launched a military raid in Venezuela without congressional approval. Senator Jack Reed came out and said Congress needed to reassert its constitutional authority. That kind of language doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from watching a president treat military action like a personal decision instead of a shared one. Then the Supreme Court ruled against Trump on his tariff powers. He had been trying to impose what he called reciprocal tariffs by executive action.
Global trading partner worldwide. Now, there are other issues involved. There are many different decisions from all of the justices. This is a deeply divided issue. They're not agreeing with all of the reasons why. But the bottom line, it is at 6-3 with two of President Trump's appointees, Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Neil Gorsuch, joining the Chief Justice John Roberts and the three liberal justices to invalidate the use of these sweeping tariffs. There are three dissenters, led by another appointee, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, joined by Justice Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. But the bottom line, Tony, a major defeat for the president. I think you can put that right up there with some of the most significant Supreme Court losses by a U.S. president in history.
All right, Jan, thank you very much. Let's go to CBS News legal analyst Jessica Levinson, who's also reading this decision with us this morning. We knew this was going to be a nuanced legal case, and indeed it was. What were the big questions and how were they decided?
So the big question, exactly as Jan said, is whether or not the president has the power to impose these sweeping tariffs under this particular law. It looks like a lengthy, divided, and complicated opinion, but the bottom line is exactly what Jan said, which is the president does not have the power under this particular statute. Why? Because of the text of the statute and because of the power that the Constitution gives to the president versus Congress.
The court said no tariffs or taxes, and only Congress can levy taxes. The ruling was 6-3, and several of Trump's own appointees joined the majority. That's how far he had pushed. Even judges he put on the bench weren't willing to go along with it anymore. What we're seeing is a president who has spent the last year governing as if Congress is optional and the courts are just speed bumps. He tried to cap credit card interest rates by posting about it online. He tried to rewrite trade policy through social media. And now he wants to change who gets to vote in federal elections the same way by declaring it from his phone. The problem is that every time he does this and gets away with it, the next move becomes easier. He keeps expanding the boundaries of what he thinks he can do unilaterally. And for a while, it worked because the pushback was weak or non-existent. But when he went after voting rules, the actual mechanics of how power is decided in this country, even some Republicans decided they couldn't stay quiet anymore. That's why this moment feels different. It's not just one more policy fight. It's the clearest sign yet that the institutions are starting to remember they have a role to play. Trump didn't take the loss quietly. Instead of accepting that Congress had blocked him, he went straight to Truth Social and threw a full-blown tantrum. All caps, no filter. He attacked the Republicans who voted against him, called them names, and accused them of helping Democrats cheat in elections. He didn't just disagree with the vote, he treated it like a personal betrayal. This wasn't a normal political response. This was the President of the United States, using his social media account to publicly punish members of his own party for daring to check his power. He didn't call for negotiation. He didn't try to find common ground. He made it clear that if you stand in his way, you become an enemy. What's really striking is the message he was sending to every Republican in Congress. He wasn't just angry about this one vote. He was warning them about the next one. Cross him on something he cares about, and he will come after you in a primary. He will back a challenger. He will try to end your career. That's the kind of pressure he's putting on his own party right now. I keep coming back to how he chose to handle this. A president who actually respected the separation of powers might have been frustrated, sure, but he would have worked within the system. Trump doesn't do that. When he gets told no, his instinct is to attack, to delegitimize, and to threaten. And he does it in public, in all caps, for everyone to see. This reaction tells us a lot about how he views power. He doesn't see Congress as a partner or even as a legitimate check. He sees it as an obstacle that needs to be removed or intimidated into submission. And that's exactly why this fight over voter ID matters more than just one policy. So here's the real question after all that rage. Can Trump actually force nationwide voter ID just by signing an executive order? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that he's going to try anyway, and he knows exactly what he's doing. Elections in the United States are run by the states, not the federal government. The Constitution gives states the power to set the times, places, and manner of elections. Congress can regulate federal elections, but the president does not have the unilateral authority to rewrite voting rules across the country. An executive order cannot override state election laws. That's not how it works. Trump understands this. He's not operating under some legal misunderstanding. His strategy has become very clear over the past year. Sign the order, let someone sue, fight it in court, and create as much chaos as possible while the case drags on. By the time the courts finally rule, the damage is often already done. We've already seen a real example of this approach. Just recently, a federal judge blocked Trump's attempt to add a documentary proof of citizenship requirement to federal voter registration forms. The judge ruled that this directive violated the separation of powers. It was the same basic idea using executive power to change voting rules, and the courts pushed back. But here's what Trump has figured out. Even if he loses in court, he can still win politically. He gets months of headlines about Democrats blocking election integrity. He gets to tell his supporters the system is rigged against him. And he keeps his base fired up heading into the midterms. For Trump, the legal process isn't an obstacle. It's part of the strategy. That's why this fight isn't really about whether the executive order will survive. It's about how much disruption he can create before it gets struck down. Here's what makes this situation more dangerous than it first appears. Trump might not actually care that much about winning this legal fight. What he really wants is the fight itself. Even if the courts eventually block his executive order, he still gets months of headlines, months of claiming that Democrats and rhinos are stopping him from securing elections. That narrative is extremely valuable to him. It reinforces the story he's been telling his supporters for years. The system is rigged, everyone is against him, and only he is fighting for them. This is the part most people miss. Trump doesn't need to successfully change voting rules to benefit from this battle. He just needs to keep the controversy alive through the midterms. Every time a judge blocks him or Congress pushes back, he gets to play the victim and rally his base. The longer the chaos lasts, the better it works for him politically. We've seen this pattern before. He creates conflict, forces institutions to respond, and then uses their response as proof that the system is broken. Whether he wins or loses in court almost doesn't matter. What matters is that he gets to spend the entire election season talking about how the Democrats are trying to steal the election and how he's the only one trying to stop them. That's why this isn't just a policy dispute. It's a deliberate strategy to keep his supporters angry and engaged right before they go to the polls. Trump isn't just angry at the Democrats. He's also sending a very clear warning to his own party. By publicly attacking the Republicans who voted against him and threatening to primary them, he's making sure everyone understands the cost of standing in his way. This isn't normal political disagreement. This is a loyalty test. The message is simple. If you don't let me do what I want, I will try to end your career. And in today's Republican Party, that threat carries real weight. A Trump-backed challenger in a primary can be extremely dangerous, even for longtime incumbents. So when Trump rages about rhinos and election stealers, he's not just venting. He's shaping behavior for the next vote. What's driving this is fear. Trump knows that if Republicans lose the House or the Senate in the 2026 midterms, his entire second-term agenda basically dies. No more easy executive orders. No more friendly investigations. No more rubber stamping. That's why he's so desperate to change the rules now. He wants to make it harder for people who don't support him to vote, and he wants to be able to claim fraud if things don't go his way. By punishing anyone in his party who pushes back, he's trying to make sure that next time he tries something like this, there will be even fewer people willing to say no. It's not just about this one executive order. It's about breaking any remaining resistance inside his own party before the midterms arrive. Trump is almost certainly going to sign this executive order anyway. He's already hinted at it, and backing down isn't in his nature. When he does, lawsuits will come immediately from states and civil rights groups. The order will likely get blocked by a judge within days, and then it will be tied up in appeals for months. By the time it's resolved, we'll be deep into the 2026 midterm campaign. That chaos is exactly what Trump wants. Even if he loses in court, he gets to spend the entire election season claiming the system is rigged and that Democrats are trying to stop him from protecting elections. His supporters will believe it, and it gives him a built-in excuse if Republicans underperform. But here's what actually matters. Congress pushed back. Not just Democrats, Republicans too. They looked at a president trying to unilaterally rewrite voting rules and said this is too far. That doesn't happen often anymore. This vote was a line in the sand. It showed that even in a deeply polarized environment, there are still some lawmakers willing to defend their institution instead of surrendering to one man's demands. The fight isn't over. Trump will keep testing the limits. But every time someone stops him, it becomes a little harder for him to claim unlimited power. That precedent is worth something. If breakdowns like this help you understand what's really happening in Washington, hit subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, do you think Congress will keep holding the line, or will Trump eventually get his way?